I believe we have two experts with us, including legal eagle, HP Ranina. So let me go across to Mr. Ranina. So Ranina, I remember we had you on ET Now the day the story broke when Cyrus Mistry and Shapoorji Pallonji group said with a heavy heart, we informed that we have agreed to sever ties with Tata Sons. I'm now being told Cyrus Mistry's valuation is unacceptable to Tata Sons. They've carried out their own study. They see the figure to be much lower than that. Do you think that's going to be the next battle?
Well, whether it's going to be a battle or not is not the issue. The issue is that if they don't agree to the valuation, then this thing just doesn't go through. In other words, the Shapoorji Pallonji group have agreed to sell their stake, provided the Tatas accept the price. Now, the Tatas feel that the price which Shapoorji Pallonji expects is very high compared to their understanding of the value of their property, that the whole thing will just simply not go through. So if it doesn't go through, then on the 28th of October, when the matter comes up in the Supreme Court again, the judges will decide the issue on merits, on the basis of the petitions and the pleadings that have been filed so far. All that we expected was that before 20th of October, there would be some, meeting point where they decide to come to a settlement. And if that settlement is reached, then consent terms will be filed in the Supreme Court so that no further proceedings will take place based on the petitions and counter-petitions filed by the two parties. Now, if no such thing happens because of this valuation issue, as you rightly point out, then simply nothing will happen. And on 28th of October, then the Supreme Court will go ahead with the hearing of the petitions on merits and then take a view in the matter.
Please stay with us. I have more questions for you. I'm going to now invite our next panelist, Mr. Sanjay Asher, also joining us here. Sanjay, good to have you on ET Now for our big story that we are breaking. We understand from our sources that the Tatas have studied Cyrus Mistry's offer and rejected the valuation of Tata Sons. Remember, this Shapoorji Pallonji group did value the Tata Sons at 9.7 lakh crore rupees. I'm being told by my sources that Tatas have internally evaluated and come up with a number much lower than that. Having said that, the question we're also debating is that will this be the next fight on what is going to be the valuation of Tata Sons that is agreeable to both sides? I'm being told by sources that one of the camps may even ask the Supreme Court to perhaps look at a independent valuation exercise that could be supervised by the court. Maybe an expert committee could look into all of that. It's early days, very, very early days, but I'm also being told that mediation is not on the table, but it's also not off the table. So that's a significant step that we're also picking up as far as that goes. We're also being told the Shapoorji Pallonji group may make a proposal to Tata Group that in lieu of the unlisted illiquid shares of Tata Sons, exchange it with the listed Tata shares. Sanjay Asher, if I could first ask you, is this the next battlefront? Valuations, and will it then be will it be on the Supreme Court to try and find consensus?
See, how I look at it is, obviously, both the parties are putting their own values on the valuation on the table. It's a question of negotiations. Now, both the parties at the same time want to resolve the issue. I don't think any person who is litigating would want to let the court decide its own fate. And so therefore, it's a question of negotiations. And both the parties will come to a consensus. That is number one. Number two is the Supreme Court, in my view, what will do is that will say, okay, I am providing a panel of 3 valuers, and let these 3 valuers decide as to what the value is on the basis of certain principles. For example, there are old Supreme Court judgments in case of wealth tax and gift tax. And I'll get into little detail, Kusumben Madhavya and Madhav Jalan, as to how the valuation of an unlisted company, where the unlisted company is holding shares of a listed entity or strings of operating entities, which are listed and also unlisted. So it's possible that the Supreme Court can provide a panel or can order that, look, let there be three valuers, let them decide on certain principles, basic principles of valuation, which have already been agreed upon by the Supreme Court, whether in case of wealth tax, whether in case of gift tax, or in case of merger or amalgamation of companies. And the classic example is Hindustan Lever and Tomco, where the Supreme Court laid down that in case there are two listed entities who are merging or amalgamating, as to what should be the mechanism of valuation. So my point is that as the things move forward, you rightly said that these are early days. I agree with that completely. Number two, in any negotiation, as all of us know, that both the parties would keep some room for the purposes of negotiation and come to a settlement. So that is what is happening. And the question then is that the mode of settlement. Yes, nobody may have a cash of that huge amount. So what do you do? In which event, yes, you settle it in kind. And how do you settle it in kind? By giving the shares of various listed entities so that the person who has to receive the money, it's easier for that person to liquidate it. At the same time, the person who has to give the money, it becomes easier. There's no rocket science in that. It's question of negotiations between the parties. And I'm quite sure that they will come to a consensus. It's, as you rightly said, it's early days. It's question of time. It's a matter of process. And I'm quite confident that this particular issue will get settled very soon.
You know, if I can take that point forward with Mr. Ranina as well, you know, like Mr. Asher was pointing out, you always ask for something much higher, the other party always offers something lower, and then you arrive at a middle ground. But you know, the problem here also is, Mr. Ranina, that let's say, like, unlike the Ambani fight or many other corporate battles that we've seen, this is not a family fight, you know, and in that sense, would it be more difficult to also find peacemakers, more difficult to find mediators? How big a challenge is that also going to be? And allow me to ask this one other question. For just finding an independent valuer for Tatas, isn't that itself going to be a challenge? Look at the scale of the company, of the conglomerate, the kind of businesses it has, its geographical presence in India and overseas. To get an independent, unbiased valuation, you know, and one that will be acceptable to the other camp.
I agree with you that this is a practical difficulty, but I think even if there are people who have been dealing with Tatas or with Shapoorji Pallonji Group, we can expect them to take an independent view if they are, because professionals will take an independent view and they have to justify their valuation based on certain calculations. So if one of the ways of doing it would be for both the parties to come together and pick up, say, 3 independent firms of repute who will value their shares. And in that case, they can come to a consensus. Normally, valuation is an art, not a science. And therefore, one could then make an average of the valuation made by those 3 independent valuers and come to a figure. Because even if this matter goes to court, ultimately it will be exactly the same procedure. The court is going to appoint valuers, and the valuation will then be subject of, negotiation between the parties. So in any such process, there has to be a certain amount of negotiation, and each party will then have to accept that. If they want to come to a settlement. If they don't want to come to a settlement, that's a different thing. But if both parties are eager to come to a settlement, then there's no choice but to accept the valuations of independent valuers and then reach a consensus. There is no other way by which you can have a negotiated settlement in these cases. So whether the Supreme Court intervenes or whether they do it on their own, ultimately it's going to boil down to the same issue.
Okay, that's a fantastic point, that both parties have to be agreeable. You need, I guess, both hands to clap. You can't force one party to the negotiating table. But Sanjay Asher, just taking forward from that, it's almost as if Cyrus Mistry, in a sense, called, if I may use this phrase, it's a crude phrase, called the Tatas bluff by saying, okay, buy me out, and gave the valuations that he has relied upon from the 2018 documents and annual reports and all of that. Sanjay Asher, my point and the question I also now want to ask you is, Cyrus Mistry and Shapoorji Pallonji has a lot more to gain or lose, right? You have the restructuring exercise, for example, which is taking place, debt obligations. On the other hand, the Tata camp is business as usual, and a stay order also by the Supreme Court which doesn't allow Cyrus Mistry to sell pledged shares. So you have this big jewel which you can't do anything with. So in that sense, isn't pretty much the entire negotiating power with the Tatas?
Apparently, yes, because cash is always king, and in case you are strapped of cash, then obviously your negotiating power reduces. And as far as Tatas are concerned, what do they have to lose except for this particular litigation which can go on for a while? As far as the Shapoorji Pallonji group is concerned, they need to settle their debt with their lenders and move on in their own business. So, in a manner of speaking, yes, I would say that Tatas have a better negotiating strength at the moment for the purposes of getting this matter settled.
This juncture, we've run out of time, so I'd like to thank both our panelists for joining us on this ET Now exclusive. If you've just tuned in, this is a story we are breaking. We understand from our sources that the Tatas have studied Cyrus Mistry's offer to be bought out. They've internally rejected the valuation provided by Cyrus Mistry of 9.7 lakh crore rupees. They see it to be lower than that. Back-channel conversations have taken place between the two warring camps. Can't say there will be a mediation, can't say there will not be a mediation. So with that, we'll take a short commercial break. We'll be back with plenty of news and updates on the other side.